Greetings, chess friends. Today we're going to see the game between Anthony Santacieri versus Bobby Fischer. And this gentleman with the white piece is Anthony Santacieri, a very Italian name, it sounds like to me, was a chess personality for some 40 years, from the 1920s all the way to the 1960s in America. A strong player who saw many of the great Americans come and go. This game was played in 1957. That makes Bobby 14 years old. A few months later, he will be the U.S. champion. Knight f3. And evidently he started with knight f3 on the first move often. And a quick side note, someone else played d5, and he accidentally touched his b pawn and played b4. This opening now bears the name Santacieri's Folly, a touch move mistake. So anyway, side note there, Bobby played knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, Bobby's typical King's Indian setup, g3, and kind of a typical opening you might see nowadays with the fianchetto setup for white as well against this King's Indian setup. So both players developing pretty naturally. e5, the typical central break black likes to go for. You have to fight for the center. And captures. Probably that's the first move that might be a little bit unnatural of sorts. I would imagine e4 is a more typical move you would see, but I could be wrong. So captures, bishop g5, h6, bishop takes f6, and queen takes f6. So the first sort of shake up in the game where you are trading a knight for bishop, something's happening, right? Not just the typical opening moves. You're trading a bishop for a knight, white did. The queen came out, might have expected a different piece to capture there, and black is doing just fine. Knight d2, an interesting move. It does kind of have a seemingly obvious purpose, the knight looking to go to e4. The bishop also now can view all the way down the diagonal. Knight c5, rook c1, a5, typical King's Indian type of move, stopping b4 so this knight can sit here comfortably. But knight b3, white definitely wants to get that out of there. Bobby plays rook d8, a tempo move, which hits the queen. And white answers with knight d5, a dangerous move. Why would we say that's a dangerous move? Well, a lot is happening. You are blocking the rook's attack on the queen, but you are also threatening black's queen. That would be a check. In addition to all that, this knight is also just hanging, a messy position. Queen d6 is the best move, and Bobby plays it. Knight takes knight, queen takes, and now this pin remains, so a good idea to move your queen. He plays queen b3, getting out of the way. Bishop f8, and rook fd1. Actually, white seems to be doing pretty well. Equal position, but white has a very nice knight in the center. The rooks are both developed to good squares. Our queen is healthy, bishop is healthy, king is safe. Everything looking pretty good. One thing to note is that black does have the two bishops, but I would say our knight is actually superior at the moment. So two bishops usually are the long-term advantage, and Bobby knew that well. Okay, Santacieri was actually a math teacher, I believe, and just a brilliant man. Organized tournaments, was a big chess writer, a painter. He did a lot of things, kind of a Renaissance man of sorts. King g7, and this game has quite a story, as all chess games have some story, but this one is quite dramatic, I would say. Rook a6, and an aggressive move. Remember, Bobby is a young man, 14, thinks he is the best, is in fact the best player in the country, and soon to be playing on the biggest stage. Rook a6 is a nice move. We can't go here quite yet, but it does defend that square, so the queen could not go. But as soon as this knight is extracted out of here, that's a potential option. Usually that rook doesn't develop so quickly, and rook a6, not a natural square, let's say. e4. Rook a d6, doubling the rooks. So that rook kind of came out of nowhere after the a-pawn moved up and over. An interesting rook lift. a3, and a good move coming here. I love these type of moves. a4. And if you don't understand that move, you really should kind of study this type of structure. One pawn holds two. Due to the move en passant, that would be able to get captured, that these pawns are really frozen in place. And this is a small little snippet, a positional idea that you see over and over again at the high levels of chess. Really good move. Bishop f1, h5. trying to play bishop g4. Natural move. h3 defends that. Pawn c6. At some moment, we knew this move was going to come. This knight, probably the best piece on the board, centralized, well placed, and it has to go. Knight c3, and here is the key moment. Bobby really blunders here with rook f6. Why did he blunder? I suspect it had to do with the pawn being under attack directly. There's also these rooks, kind of a staring contest between the rooks and our rook, and queen is guarding that as well. So I suspect he didn't want to play a safe defending this pawn type of move. The engine I see is giving moves like queen a7 or queen a5, defending this pawn. There's also potentially rook d2, an interesting move. But he plays rook f6. Perhaps he overlooked the next move or misevaluated it, is probably more likely. But here, Sentieri plays queen, captures that rook on f6. How could it be? Well, you need to be looking at the whole board. And there's also this rook being attacked. So white is, in fact, taking 2 rooks of Bobby Fischer and only giving up his queen. So that's a classic material imbalance, 2 rooks for a queen. But Bobby must have missed this because I don't think he would go into this scary position. This bishop is guarded, but it's just so scary with your king out. Bishop h6, rook d1. You want to be on that open file, and bishop e6. So the king probably not really in much danger as it has 2 escape routes and no pieces can really threaten it. But white having the 2 rooks cemented on this open d file, almost cutting the board in half. I tend to favor white in these positions. In addition to that, he does snatch this pawn away. So that's an extra pawn in white's pocket. I feel like white has the practical chances here, but really, actually a beautiful move was missed here, coming by Bobby Fischer. He plays a good human move, h4, and he could have played this move I'm going to show right now or on the next move. Let's just show king g2. Oops, one more move right here. He played bishop e3, but he could have played this move earlier as well. Bishop c1. Easy to overlook. That's a real engine type move. What is this based on? Well, it's pretty easy to see. If you take that, you're actually giving this rook away for free. That's it. The rooks need to stay connected. So the point, though, is this bishop is now pestering these pawns here. You can't really play a move like b4. I can just capture this pawn for free, threatening the knight, guarding the bishop, and a real mess here for white. So he plays bishop e3, but bishop c1 would have looked a little nicer, and bishop d4. Another good lesson here, you want to anchor your bishops, especially to pawns, your minor pieces, let's say, to pawns in the endgame. So this bishop is pretty cemented, and it gets even more treatment here in a minute. Queen a7, why not just take the pawn now? It looks free. You need to, again, be watching through the pieces. Look at that knight. Where could it jump to? Check. The check is critical. Black will likely capture this knight, and then white's turn again, the queen. So you can't take this pawn on a3. He retreats, Bobby. Knight e2. c5. And that really, again, cements this bishop in with the 2 pawns. When he takes it right here, we're actually getting a passed pawn now, and it feels like the game is turning in black's favor. That D file now closed. Remember, that was completely our file. Now it's closed. The queen really gets to run amok a little bit and ends up taking all of these pawns in just a moment, and these 2 pawns kind of dominate the position. White doesn't really have any attacking chances either. Maybe just kind of an empty check. There it is. King g7, safe as can be. Pawn c5, and now all these pawns get taken. Engine is giving g4, stopping any type of pawn break or pawn advances. This pawn's still guarded. This pawn's still guarded. So white is staying firm, but c5 is actually shakier than it looks. The pawn chains you think are really good, but Bobby plays a good move here, f5. Black is taking over. Bobby is taking over here and winning. Queen takes that one. Notice the disconnection here. I think this game really turned when the D file closed down. This pawn drops. King g1. White has lost the thread of this game. Queen takes b4. And queen takes c5. All 3 pawns in succession taken. Now, we do lose this one with the check, but this game is coming to an exciting climax. Here, another mistake, actually, king f6. The best move, safest move, when you're moving your king, you want to think safety first. What's the best move is usually what's the safest move. It's here, king h6. And that king is tremendously safe. There's no problems walking into the line of this rook. Not sure what he was worried about here. Pawn takes. Maybe we have some sort of fork, a little foreshadowing of what's to come. But instead, Bobby goes king f6. And I want to stop here for a moment and make an important point. And that is well known in chess circles and chess tradition that mistakes come in bunches. Mistakes come in twos or threes, let's say. Usually when you make one mistake and then you realize, oh, my position's a little worse than it was, then the next mistake hits you and it's worse. Let me say that in a different way. You can usually withstand one mistake and keep fighting on. That's what the strongest players do. They can make a small inaccuracy and keep going. Us mere mortals make one and then compound it and again, and then we're just lost. So that's really the issue here. And Bobby makes one mistake, but black is still better. E takes f5, and the next move is blunder. Queen d5. See if you can find white's move. This completely throws the game away. F takes e6, discovery check. An incredible move, and young Bobby Fischer just resigns. Incredible. I suspect he missed that queen takes rook is not possible. Rook to f7. When you're calculating this variation, again, if he takes, then I'll just take. That's fine. The pawn is not actually here. In your mind's eye, a pawn needs to be there. So then you see, this square is guarded. The rook can go there and take the queen, just as takes this variation would show. So your mind needs to picture that e6 pawn being there. I suspect that's what happened. Let's rewind a little bit and just show here that almost any other move wins. The best move is very easy and natural. G takes f5. Not sure what he was too worried about here. We always have check on the back rank. We do have threats with the queen hitting both rooks. Notice you might not want to play this one due to rook takes f5. Might still be fine because with the bishop here, you're hitting the rook and the queen coming back here. Not sure about that, but black is pretty comfortable. You could also play queen c1 here instead of the blunder that occurred. Notice rook f1 blocking. We have queen e3 check. Scary position. You could also play bishop d5 here and do exactly what you wanted to do. Hit both rooks. This has a beautiful variation, though, and I want to show this one. Needless to say, there were a few good moves, and queen d5 absolutely threw the game away. Let's go back to bishop d5. This is a very fun one, as I kind of play around with the engine on sometimes, and it showed something remarkable, and that was capturing the pawn. Again, that's a check. Bishop can just plain take that. We're down a queen for just a rook. And you might think, Chris, what's the big deal? You just play check and take this back. You have a pretty good load of pieces for just that queen. But after king g5, you don't take it. Instead, h4. And if they try to guard this bishop, no checks really here. This one, we take this pawn. It's very scary. We're nearly mated. But the move king h2. I thought this was an incredible variation where the engine says white is completely winning with only a pawn and a rook for a queen. White completely winning. Test out some moves. Calculate on your own here. Tell me what you think. White completely winning this position. Very funny. So let's rewind. None of that happened again, and Bobby played queen d5. And Sentieri played the discovery check, and here Bobby resigned. One other variation that maybe could be looked at for a second would be king takes, but rook f7, not the only winning move, but this is a devastating move as well. So many scary situations with the double rooks. Most serious would be check, king moves, and then the rook backtracks to check, hitting queen and king. So let's make just a blank move here. The threat is really to play check and check. That's going to pick up the queen. So you could say your queen has to move here, but there's not too many places to go. Still scary here for the king. We have all kinds of checks. And not to mention, we're just up a bishop. So black is completely losing this one. Bobby Fischer really threw this game away. Wow, had multiple winning moves here in Queen D5. One of the worst blunders you can find in his catalog of games. But of course, then a couple months later, he becomes the U.S. champion, like we said, and then Grandmaster the next year, I believe, and then many times U.S. champion, and of course, world chess champion, American 1972. So, really hope you enjoyed this one. Kind of one of those untold stories of chess. Maybe it's been told a few times, but an interesting character. Here, a master player, but certainly not even close to the level of Bobby. And really getting a free win here against the prodigy, Bobby Fischer, 14 years old at the time of this game. Thank you again, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this one. And again, we're going to keep going with our historical chess content and stories and educational lessons. Hope you're enjoying. And if you would just subscribe, keep watching, tell your friends, comment, whatever you can do. I appreciate the support very much. So thanks again.